Hello and welcome back to a new Kerbal Space Program video, and this time not from the launch pad itself. No, this time we're starting in the SPH with a speed build. If you're not interested in a speed build, there are timestamps down below in the description and this chapter's segmentation of the YouTube timeline bar, so you can jump straight to the liftoff of the mission. For those of you who decide to stick around, well, welcome to the speed build, and it has been quite a while since we last did a speed build. As far as I can remember, the last speed build was actually around mid-December, where we built a Mark III SSTO to Limitless during the Limitless colonization collaboration. Anyway, so today we are building a nice rover. This rover has actually two purposes: defensive purpose and a science purpose, but more on that in just a second. So we are going to Dres, right? Why are we going to Dres, since Dres is more or less the forgotten world in KSP? Well, I decided, since we haven't visited Dres whatsoever in this save file, so we have nothing on Dres. That's like more or less the first reason. The second reason, it has been quite a long time since we've visited Dres on this channel. So there's actually already a Dres video on this channel, right? This is like the kind of a additional reason. And the other reason is, I think for the personal narrative, Dres is a rather interesting point. So what I mean with personal narrative, like I already touched upon at the very beginning, this rover is on the one hand a science rover, as you can see here, made this science surface features scanning arm and science equipment now on the rear part of the rover, so we're obviously going there for science. And like I said, since we haven't been there so far on this save file. And on the other hand, or the other reason, is we're building small missiles, as you can see me building right now there, and we're actually going to place 4 of them on the rover, and those missiles are kind of, in theory of course, there are no warheads or explosives in the stock game. So the idea behind those is that if there's an asteroid coming from the kind of this region of space, kind of beyond Duna, coming down into the inner Kerbal system, we could blow them up or just impact with those missiles. Since Dres is between Duna and Jool, this is more or less in theory where most of the asteroids should be, as for the asteroid belt. And now just constructing a pretty simple chassis, and with that all out of the way, we can crossfade to the launch pad, yeah! And we have a nice liftoff here. It is a nighttime launch because the transit window actually opened up during night, and I didn't want to. And then since I upgraded the ambient lighting boost quite a lot, I still think even with the YouTube compression, the lighting should be sufficiently bright in order to see what's happening. Speaking of happening, we have a pretty standard rocket that will get us into orbit. Some SLBs to get us from the ground, to get us really off the ground, high thrust weight ratio, and then those 4 liquid fuel boosters on the side around the central core. Speaking of the central core, this central core will actually start the injection burn towards Dres, but more on that in just a second. So since Dres is not really an often visited place, I actually do want to talk about throughout the entire mission, actually every now and then a bit, on how to get to Dres. So the first step here is of course the Kerbin escape burn. Like I said, we're burning with the first, with the core stage, then ditching it and continue on with the upper stage there. As for Dres, since it is like Duna, higher, you have to burn kind of pro-grade in terms of the relation to Kerbin. And because Dres has such a high inclination, you have to make a mid-course correction burn, and this is exactly what you just saw me doing here. Now we're time warping forward to Dres, and here comes a rather special thing. So in order to drop off the rover, I came up with a rather special, rather interesting actually, interesting in the engineered construction. And first we do have to reconfigure this since we have to obviously drop down the rover with the wheels down, and I launched it with the wheels pointing sideways in terms of for the rocket, so that the fairing is not that ridiculously large. So we're doing a small amount of reconfiguring like the Apollo mission, but of course nothing apart from the reconfiguring has anything in common with the Apollo mission. At the same, or just after that, in high space, very high space above Dres, we're doing a small correction burn just to get our periapsis nice and close to Dres itself. And here we are approaching Dres. We still have quite a lot of fuel, luckily, in this transfer, or just upper stage, generally speaking, on this upper stage, which we're going to use completely and start our deceleration burn. However, as our fuel starts to dwindle, I select the docking port and to select from there to change the control point, ditching the transfer stage and igniting on landing engines to finish off our capture burn. And speaking of capture burn and these engines in general, they are kind of bugging around. Well, in terms of bugging around, not all of them are providing 100% thrust. Somehow the game does not recognize them to be sufficiently away from the structure, and this is why you get also these weird effects, kind of ground effects. So I started disabling those cup engines that have quite a large amount of gimbaling, since I think they were the ones that were most impacted by this kind of reduction in thrust. And we already did the most intensive in terms of thrust to weight ratio burn. Now we are coming in close to the surface. We are back to more or less reasonable time acceleration speeds. Nice and slowly coming to the surface. The wheels are touching down, and we activate our staging to get back up with the sky crane. So this sky crane was attached via this long beam that you can see still sticking underneath it to the rover itself, and we were able to fly, kind of detach the rover with that. Now we're flying up, and we're going to drop this beam from the docking port that is attached to the kind of to the front of the cockpit, to the capsule there. That's the word I was actually searching for. Since this is actually a rather weird contraption, the cockpit is pointing down. The command pod is pointing down. This is a rather interesting contraption, so that's why interesting design choice. And we are landing right next to the rover itself. Brilliant! And with that, the surface fun can actually begin. By the way, this is now again ridiculously fast forwarded, since in the beginning I was a bit playing around with the, well, it's no longer really new, but still with the rather new feature of constructing. I just wanted to play around a bit. So this is not really the first section, it's not really mission related at all, but I still thought, why not, since we're already at Dres, might as well show this in a rather quick fashion. Anyways, now playing around, we're over playing around, we're going to take our Kerbin, jump into the rover, and time for some surface exploration, since, like I said, in the building process, this rover has two goals, two missions. First of all, science. So we are driving over to this first, what was a meteorite impact from, or asteroid impact, yeah, on Dres. So we're scanning it with the surface arm. However, I actually had to reload prior to the footage you're seeing here again. Somehow the rover was bogging around, and during the scan of this surface feature, it also was bogging around, and we couldn't complete the scan. Like, just at the end of the scanning, somehow decided to, nope, we're not gonna scan it. So yeah, but I'm still gonna count this at least, as we've scanned the first surface feature, and now we're driving over to another impact crater. So to the second surface feature, we're going to scan this one as well. So, speaking of impact crater, this has actually something to do with the second part of the mission. If you haven't been watching the speed build, these four pointy things pointing up from the rover are obviously small rockets / missiles, and the personal narrative of those is, since Dres is in between Duna and Jool, the probabilities of asteroids or just generally other hazardous space objects flying past it and towards Kerbin is quite high, and those 4 missiles are kind of as interceptors. So if something dangerous is flying towards Kerbin or some other Kerbal installation, this rover will be notified and can send off a missile in order to intercept and deal with the threat. And just as an example, we are here obviously going to launch one, and just pressing the spacebar after having throttle up, and the missile goes off, and we can do this 4 times in total. And these missiles have 2,200-ish meters per second of delta V each, so they have quite a lot of delta V. I'm not having a delta V map right in front of me right now, but still, this is more than enough fuel, or just, delta V for that matter, to get back to Kerbin, to get to Jool, probably to Eve, definitely to Duna. So they have quite a wide range, so that's pretty good. Now we're just crashing this missile back towards the Kerbals. Since this launch was just as a kind of demonstration and not really with any purpose. So yeah. So the Kerbals are happy also playing around on Dres, having some fun, visiting this forgotten world. Well, we haven't forgotten it, right? Since we actually visited it. But we are going to reload back to the rover without having launched the missile, just to have a fully stocked rover with 4 missiles ready to go at a moment's notice. And with that being out of the way, the last thing to do on the surface of Dres is planting a flag. Like I said, Dres is not forgotten. This is kind of... I don't know why people actually hate Dres. I do agree it is not the most interesting place to visit, especially if you can go to the Moon, have pretty much the same-ish terrain, or to Ike if you want to go to an off-world moon. But anyways, with the Kerbals back on board the craft, it's time to launch and head back. So there we have a nice shot of the lander flying off into the sky, or back into space actually, since there is no atmosphere around Dres, and we are going straight into orbit, or just horizontal acceleration. Since there is no atmosphere, there is no point to do a gradual launch like on Kerbin. So one small other thing I wanted to touch up on is that when you're going to Dres and back from Dres, it is rather important to have a transfer window, since the comparably high inclination change can be rather expensive. So that's why we are performing our escape burn from Dres, as you can see us doing right here, at the comparably to, well, during the transfer window obviously, and this is at the more or less ascending or descending node compared to Kerbin. So, and now we are actually going to perform a small correction burn at periapsis or close to periapsis, where our new orbital plane will intersect with the orbital plane of Kerbin, and we're going to decelerate there a tiny bit in order to get on the next orbit a nice encounter with Kerbin. And this is what you can see me doing here with this maneuver node. So we get a rough encounter, and now after having performed a very small additional maneuver node at our apoapsis, you can see me fine-tuning it right now, since we are now more or less 1.5-ish years from our encounter with Kerbin at our apoapsis, which is more now in between the orbit of Dres and Kerbin, and still kind of high above the orbit of Duna. We are doing a small correction burn just to get right into Kerbin's atmosphere when we arrive in the Kerbin system. So now, just as a small now in the sphere of influence of Kerbin, just to show you the apoapsis height. Speaking of periapsis height, and I clicked warp here, which was a mistake, since we actually warped straight into the atmosphere more or less, and this is not good since we are pointing the wrong way. Now again, small correction burn just at the edge of the sphere of influence of Kerbin to have a nice atmospheric entry at around 42 kilometers. So this is a altitude like 45, 42, something like that is what I generally aim for with my SSGAs when coming down from, for example, Limitless. So I decided this is also probably a good altitude for interplanetary re-entries. So we're just going to use up that remaining 100 meters per second of fuel that we had in our stage, and we're going to enter heat shield first. And this is why I reloaded earlier, since pointing the wrong way is deadly. So yeah, keep this in mind. And now, from now on, we're just gonna go through the atmosphere. In the first pass, we just captured into an orbit, and on the second pass, we are deorbiting right over mountain range. Not the perfect and ideal landing space, but we still have 2 parachutes. And with that being said, we are here touching down on the surface of Kerbin after our mission to Dres and back, having left our defensive rover on Dres, still operating and everything ready to go. On this note, I hope you have enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Spaceship signing out.